So I'm really, really excited to sort of take the time to think back about the last 10 years, and then also think about the future. And maybe just take the time. We won't be on this for a super long time. I don't want to spend 6 hours on a Zoom call, but I do want to also take some time to hear some stories from some of you about, some of your experiences with Dirty Free Hub. So Kevin, anything from you?
Yeah, I mean, we got a small group, so this can be highly interactive. So if
Yeah,
people have
super fun.
questions, just chime in and ask your question.
Yeah,
So let's keep it very light and open
let's
to
have fun.
conversation.
Yeah. So the very first thing I want to do is I want to reflect back. So Kevin, if you want to fast forward, and I'm going to have Pete. I've asked Pete, who you might recognize Pete's voice from podcasting, and I thought we would have him interview Kevin about how did Dirty Free Hub start. So go ahead, Pete.
Well, I get to interview Kevin. This is an honor. So let's rewind the clock, Kevin. Let's go back 10 years. How did you come up with the idea for Dirty Free Hub?
Um, I never really did come up with the idea. I had a bad mountain biking accident 10 years ago, and it put me off the mountain bike for 2 years. And what happened is I became the de facto support crew for Linda and her girlfriends when they were doing road rides. And as I was doing this support in more remote places like Post and Paulina, I would kind of get bored, and so I'd take the Jeep and I'd drive the Jeep off the paved roads onto the gravel roads, and I started seeing some pretty cool things. There was agate fields back there. There was peaks back there that I'd never seen. There was lakes and waterfalls, and all of a sudden I'm like, this looks pretty cool. Why are we not experiencing some of these parts of Oregon on bike? And so initially we just kind of poked around on mountain bikes on gravel roads. And then, a company called Salsa came out with this thing called a gravel bike, and we purchased a couple of those. And then it just kind of went forward from there.
And if you look back at this, so you had this, now you have this idea. What about the name? How did you come up with Dirty Free Hub?
So what happens in the internet era is you want a name such that you can purchase that name and that address that is spelled out. And there's people worldwide buying names all the time. And it's hard to find a unique name. And a free hub is that part in the back of the bike that lets the back tire spin when you're not pedaling. So, okay, free hub, cool. And it's like if you're riding dirt roads or stuff like that, it's going to get kind of dirty. And initially, I never saw this as a nonprofit organization. So I was kind of being cheeky about it. It's like, oh, Dirty Free Hub, it's got this cheeky, almost pornographic kind of feel to it. I'll take Dirty Free Hub. And, so I got the name, and that just kind of stuck.
That were there other names you considered, or was this the name?
There were other names, and I don't remember what any of them were. But this was just kind of the one I could purchase, and I got it.
Well, we spent a lot of time looking at things that had like gravel bike adventure, stuff like that in them, but none of it really stuck. I'm really glad we didn't do that.
Yeah.
So the first few years, I mean, you're at this point, how did you really launch Dirty Free Hub? I mean, you're riding these gravel roads and you're thinking, what am I going to do? What did you try to accomplish, and what was your vision at that time?
What I was trying to accomplish was I kept riding these great spots in Oregon on dirt roads, gravel roads, and I kept forgetting about them. And it's like, oh, let's go do that ride. And I couldn't remember what the hell the ride was. And it's like, okay, I got to create something, some kind of list. And so I started creating a list, and I put it on the internet just for myself to have it on a list. And then I kind of kept adding to that list and adding more information to each one of these lists. And all of a sudden, a route was no longer in a list. A route became a page. And then it just kind of grew organically. I'd have people say, hey, can you share your list or your routes with us? So I'd start sharing the website. And then people would start giving comments of, hey, it'd be nice if we had, this in it or that in it. And it just kind of evolved really organically based on community and friend input.
So how many routes today are curated? Now,
Uh,
not just in Oregon.
Linda's got this
All
number. I
across.
think it's like 285.
Yeah,
Is it 285? 285 curated routes, something like that.
And growing all the time.
Yep. Yeah.
Growing.
There's a ton out there. Sarah and Sarah are on here, and both of them are beating me up because both of them have probably about 5 routes ready to publish that I just haven't done a final check on. And I know they're both absolutely frustrated with me. Because I could actually list off what they are. So yeah, it's growing all the time. It is.
Great. So last question. Today, what are you the most proud of with Dirty Free Hub?
I
Let me
think I'm,
answer it that you're still married.
yeah.
All right, we'll stop there, Linda. That's it.
No, I want to hear him answer it.
I think what I'm most proud of that we've morphed into these social missions that I feel really connected to and passionate about. And so, helping, get us all riding in rural spots and learning about what rural agriculture is like is really cool, or learning about culture or history or something about the indigenous peoples. I'm really excited about that. I like sharing that. It's like I forget if I shared the story of Black Butte and Green Ridge with you. It goes back to Indian folklore, and they have some great folklore about that. And I love sharing those kinds of things.
Well, you guys have done a great job. And whenever I ride with you, you always have some good historical and relevant content. So I can see why you're proud of that end.
I'm going to give you a piece of trivia. So almost everybody on here has ridden the Mackenzie River Trail, I believe. What is super cool about the Mackenzie River Trail, which most of us don't know, the Mackenzie River Trail is on the dividing line between the High Cascades lava flow and the Western Cascades lava flow. The Western Cascades lava flow is approximately 30 million years old. The High Cascades lava flow is approximately 5 million years old. And the High Cascades lava flow is the poorest lava flow of the two. It's the one that allows the snow and the rainwater to seep down through it and have things pop up like the Blue Pool. So when you're riding that Mackenzie River Trail, realize you're riding on you're right on the borderline of 2 different lava flows. And if you look to the east and look to the west at certain times, you should be able to tell just by looking at the lava that there's 2 different types of lavas there.
Terrific. Thanks, Kevin.
Yep.
Great stuff.
Yeah,
Linda?
Thank you. Really
That's
interesting.
what I come here for.
All right, so let's look at what is Dirty Free Hub today. And Kevin was talking a little bit about our social mission. So let's go ahead. We're going to do a little bit of a game here. There we go. So these pictures each represent 6 of our social missions. And then we also have what I call is a guiding rule. And so does anybody want to take a stab at one of the pictures? What about the one on the top left? What do we think that represents? Chris, why don't we have you go first?
Safety.
Safety. Okay. So, yeah, we definitely are worried about safety. Any other ideas on that one?
Yeah, and Chris, we've changed safety to accessibility and inclusion.
Oh, that's not it because it's a white guy going down. That is riding and enjoying your bike.
Yeah, true. We want to inspire cyclists to get out there and ride, so that they have a great time, and they're riding something that's appropriate for their level. So, what about the bottom left-hand corner? So, Kevin, tell me what is that picture? What is that actually of?
Okay, so this is a dredge, a gold mining dredge that was used in the late 1800s and early 1900s to dredge up rock and water and run it into a sluicing mechanism to pan out gold. And that one is from Sumter, Oregon.
Okay, any idea from the group on what social mission that would be? Steve, you look like you're ready to go. Gluckman.
Well, I was gonna say no history about the areas that you're riding in.
Correct. Great. History, culture. We really want you to learn about where you ride. So Sue Foster, is it okay if I call on you? She's putting her hand over.
Sure.
Okay, what do you think the tarantula? This is a tarantula down in Arizona. This is actually on one of your rides. What do you think he represents?
Um, gosh,
Pretend it was a bear or a wolf.
Yeah.
right. Expect the unexpected.
That's actually, that would be a great
Uh,
social mission.
Riding in groups. No, I don't know. I don't
Okay,
know what
no
that
worries.
is. Yeah.
How about
Wildlife.
if we think about the environment while we're out there?
Uh,
We're really worried about wildlife impact. In the case of this guy, we all had to stop because he was in the middle of our path, and we wanted to make sure that we didn't run him over. So, okay, so the middle one with everybody at a bar. This is anybody know where this is where this picture was actually taken? There might be somebody here that recognizes this place.
Tiger Brewing.
Yes.
Yeah, ding, ding, ding. We
Cam,
have
are you in? Cam, you are in that picture, aren't you?
I might be.
Yes, you are.
And Cam, what social mission do you think that represents? Why do we care about whether or not you're out drinking beers afterwards on your bike rides?
Oh, stimulating the rural communities. I would think.
Yeah,
Spending our money out there.
Yes.
this is a perfect one for you, actually. So
Yeah.
Cam in her real life is a CFO and a certified CPA and a few other CIEIOs that
Yeah.
all have to do with money. She's also on our board, so she's the person. She's our answer lady when we turn in our financials. She's the one who says this line doesn't match up right here. Excuse me. Very thorough. Okay, so and then let's take the woman on this funky bike to the right. It looks like an adaptive bike. Does anybody want to take a stab at that one? Pete?
Well, I think there's been some good trail work to improve the accessibility for adaptive riders, specifically water and lava that happened, about 2 months ago? There was some clearing. So I think it's about creating accessibility on some of these routes.
And
Yeah, it's about, go ahead, Linda.
I want to be careful in having people think that all we're worried about is adaptive athletes. We're actually worried about all athletes. And that goes from everything from, do we charge for Dirty Free Hub routes, which we do not. We've made very conscious decisions to not charge for route guides because we want everybody to have access regardless of their economic status. And we also really do worry about e-bikers. Because we want them out there. And, we're not fighting the battle on whether or not they should be on single track. We are fighting the battle to say, hey, look, we have a bunch of routes that are perfect for you. So I think that that's also really important.
Yeah, so accessibility and inclusion can be the person who hasn't been on a bike in 20 years and maybe gained 20 pounds and wants to get back into it. Can we provide routes that fit their need of 15 miles and rather flat? Or let's say the person who's got a heart condition and does need an e-bike. So, and this is a big project we're actually working on. We're working on a grant with Travel Oregon for a significant amount of money to create a complete guide of accessible routes that we're calling all access.
Okay.
Linda, back to you.
Yeah. So the man on the horse, anybody want to take a stab as to why we included this picture? This is a tough one. Mike Hobson, maybe? Nope.
Well, I can try. I know what it is because Kevin and I talked about it. It was the potato guy.
Oh, it's not the potato guy.
Oh, it's not.
No.
It's not.
I just figured it was. Well, I'm out then. I don't have no idea.
No, but he's similar to the potato
He's
guy.
similar to the potato guy.
Is it trail etiquette?
Nope.
No.
Don't assume rednecks are rednecks.
You get an F.
You're failing the diversity, equity, and inclusion statement here.
Right. So this guy was out in Fossil, right, Kevin?
Yes, he's
So we ran a guy
85 years old. Yeah.
Cowboy. He grew up in Fossil, Oregon. He was fascinating to talk to. I think we spent 30 minutes talking to him. He did not know why I wanted to take his picture, even though I thought he was the cutest thing in the world. But really, when we look at, we send a lot of city slickers out to the countryside. And a lot of you guys don't know a cow from a bull. You don't really understand farming where you're out there. And yet we're blazing through these areas, these farmlands or forest areas where they're doing logging. And so we really do want to break down this urban rural divide. That's really important to us. So
Yeah, so it's stopping, talking, and just engaging in conversation.
so those are our 6 social missions, but we also have a guiding rule, which I think a lot of people will find interesting. And that is that we really do view Dirty Free Hub as a sandbox. We want people to play in it. This gentleman who we featured here in the red is actually a route ambassador that we have in Idaho. And he does crazy things. I mean, he's like the guy that comes to you and says, what if we did this? What if we did that? Dirty Free Hub is full of these people. It's Sarah, who are both on this call, are great examples of that as well. And we want to inspire us to think way outside the box. And so we're going to talk to Sarah Birch today about her Read and Ride program. And that's a great example of that, of really thinking outside of that box. So any questions on the social missions? Okay. So most of you know us about route guides. And this year was a great example of making major improvements on our website. We actually hired Delicious Designs, which is a local firm. We had how many people were on your UI design team, Kevin, your user interface?
I had well over 10 people on the UI design team. And if were on the UI design team, raise your hand out there. I'd love to acknowledge you if you were, who helped, set what the design of the new website looked like.
These guys spent hours fighting over, do you say save to favorites? Do you say, whatever? I mean, every little detail of the website, they went through it. I was not on it because that's not my strength at all. So, but I was very, very thankful that we had such a strong team. So that's what most of you think about Dirty Free Hub is, but there's a lot more to Dirty Free Hub to this. But let me talk about the numbers first off. So I think Pete asked Kevin about how many routes do we have. So we actually have 282 routes with 13,000 miles of curated route guides. And we get about 15,000 users in a month who come to our website. And you can see that we've got 24% come from Oregon, 20% come from Washington, 20% come from California. And then we're starting to build a presence in Arizona. So we know that a lot of our traffic is actually coming from people who are visiting an area that they've never been to, which that makes sense. You're going to an area, so you are going to be possibly a tourist. Okay, next page.
So it's 15,000 users a month, but we're reaching about 1 million accounts per year, social media accounts per year.
Yeah. Okay. Now I want to talk to Kevin a little bit about, we're going to break routes into 2 different things. The first is how do you actually find a great route? And the second part will be how do you actually create the route guide? And those are 2 totally different things, and they're really separate processes. So Kevin, tell me a little bit about how you find a route. What makes, first off, what are you looking for? What makes a good route?
So for us, as us being Dirty Free Hub, what we define a good route is something that has points of interest or anchor points. And that could be a viewpoint, that could be a cultural icon. It could be a old historic school, something of that sort. Next part we're looking for is texture. Of at least every 10 miles, you want it to change up somehow, from either riding good gravel to now you're riding lumpy gravel, or you're riding in the flats to now you're riding in the hills, or you were climbing, or now you're descending. You got to get something changing in every 10 miles to give the user a difference. And then the other thing I look for in a route is if you put somebody on that technical edge for a while, like 30 minutes of where it's really technically and mentally taxing, you need to back them off that edge for a bit, give them some time to recuperate, both physically and mentally. But I'm really looking for that, does it have big payback with visual beauty and culture and history and heritage?
Now, I bet it must be really easy to find these routes. You just go to heat map and it's really obvious where we go, right? I mean, how hard can that be to actually find these routes?
So it's finding routes or putting routes together on a piece of paper is actually not that hard. You do have heat maps, you do have Strava, you do have Ride with GPS, you do have benchmark maps, you do have Gaia. The tough part is once you put an electronic pencil or a physical pencil down on paper, you don't know how good it is. You just don't know what you have. You can look at satellite photography, you can look at terrain, and it gives you some idea. it might be good, it might not. If you look at the right-hand picture here, we thought that was a great route, and it could have been a great route, but there was no feedback mechanisms in place for communicating that right now it has significant tree fall. And we hit about a mile of tree fall. And at times we were 20 feet, 30 feet in the air on these tree falls, handing bike from rider to rider. And so it was, on paper, it looked really, really good. And it could have been really, really good, but it just didn't turn out to be good because of what was there on the ground.
Now tell me about what makes a person. We always talk about this, that there are people who are explorers who like going out and finding routes, and then there's, I would say, the vast majority of people really don't particularly enjoy that process. So what do you explain? How do you explain that?
An explorer needs to be somebody who comes prepared in terms of, hey, I'm planning on a 3-hour ride, but I could do 6 if I had to that day. Somebody who comes with a positive attitude of the shit has really gone south, but you can still smile about it. Somebody who is mechanically attuned in case something really does break and you got to fix it. Medically able to handle medical situations that may come up, and then mapping or following routes on your bike computer in terms of, man, I got to reroute. How do I do it? So it's part of its attitude. Part of it's being with other people who feel like they're part of the team and bring something to the team, so they add value. And part of it is just, you got to smile and just embrace what comes at you.
Yeah, we've certainly done a lot of that. So now we're going to talk. Is there anything else you wanted to add to that?
No, we're cool.
Okay. So now I want to talk to one of our route creators. So we will create a route, and then we have to write about it and actually go in and write the route guide. Oh, God, say that a little bit too fast. And we actually have 5 people who work on this. On the bottom left-hand corner is Sarah Graham. Obviously, in the middle, you recognize that would be Kevin. To the right is Sarah Birch. To the top right-hand corner is Corey. Oh, I should tell you where they're based. Corey is actually based in Baker City. The guy with the helmet on, Aaron, he's based in Idaho. Sarah Birch is based in Bellingham some of the time. A lot of times she's in a van riding around, and we will meet her just in a little bit. But Sarah Graham, she's based near Clay Ellen, Washington. So Sarah, tell me a little bit about what it's like to create a route guide for Dirty Free Hub.
Do you mean just the guide and not the actual scouting of a route?
Yeah. So now we're talking more about, we've got the route identified, and now we've decided, this thing is 5 stars. We love it. There's a whole process that goes through.
Actually, Sarah, I'm going to change the question a little bit. Let's take your route that you recently did, Roslyn Rocks. So you did the route, you did the ride, you did the documentation. So what's that process like?
So the scouting of the route was really tough, because of everything that you said before. Like, you can look at the heat maps, but that doesn't tell you about the current condition of anything. And so I had this route put together that I thought was going to be awesome, and I just had my butt handed to me a couple different times in different spots, and just had to kind of, poke around while I was still out there, because it was some of these were in locations where I couldn't easily just go drive and check it out again the next day. Like, it's tough work getting back up in there. So it just took me a lot longer to formulate a solid route than I thought it would. And it ended up, I kind of wanted it to be super challenging and as far as the route itself. And it ended up, it is a tough route. I think it ended up being, it's like 31 miles. And I wrote in the guide that people need to prepare for it to take all day, because it's just super tough.
Sounds lovely. I can't wait to
love
do it.
that. I like a challenge. So I was excited about that. But part of what what was super fun was just kind of the puzzle aspect of it, because I knew all of these points of interest that I really wanted to link together into one route. And so I had to kind of get creative. I had a couple extra like dog legs that I was trying to avoid, but it ended up being unavoidable to be able to include these features. And it was just super fun, just, going out, taking the pictures of the places and doing the like deeper research. Like I knew there was this one really cool rock, but I had no idea how it formed. And so kind of digging into the geology behind all of that was really fun. Digging more into some of the history of this area, which I had already done a little bit of, and that's why I wanted to make this route, but going a little deeper with it was really interesting. And I was just super excited to put something out there that showcases this area, because the views are astounding. And, in a single day of riding, you can learn so much about this really interesting spot in Washington and get these epic views and kick your own butt in the process and support local businesses that, year round, they don't have consistent business. So the more we can kind of bring people into town when stuff is rideable, the better off they'll be. So yeah.
So Sarah, are you 5'6" or 5'7"?
Are you talking about my height?
Yeah, I'm talking about your height.
Oh God, I'm 5 feet.
Okay. So Sarah is
I
super,
was
super
5'6".
Okay. She's super tough, way tougher than me. And I'm guessing you rode most of this solo. Is that true?
I did, which it was unfortunate because that means none of my pictures have another person in them, but I'll get some someday.
Yeah. And I think you themed a lot of this route on different rock structures, which is really cool.
Mm-hmm.
And can you talk about points of interest? I forget how many points of interest you got in this route guide, but how long does it take you to write the points of interest? Because you're researching on the internet, learning about the structures. Can you walk us through that process a little bit?
Sometimes it's super easy if I luck out and there just happens to be a reliable source that I actually want to link to from the site that has encapsulated the essence of that POI in a paragraph. That's pretty rare, but when that does happen, it's super easy. I just copy and paste. But it gets tougher when there's just kind of a whole bunch of random elements of something, and I think they're all interesting, but I just don't have enough space. So there's only so much you can do with wordsmithing, and beyond that, you have to just decide what's going to be truly the most interesting tidbits, and then just kind of getting that into a readable, digestible, interesting format. It it can be challenging, but it's so fun because I'm such a dork with this kind of stuff. And so I'm just so curious about all these things. So I love learning about them and then getting to share it. It's tough to decide what to prioritize sometimes, because I think all of it is cool.
Cool. Wendy, back to you.
Yeah, no, that's great. That's great. So hopefully that gives you some idea of how we actually create these route guides. And it is really hard to figure out what's the right content to focus on. So one of the things that we have been also involved in over the last couple of years is creating physical printed guides. This is something that I never thought that we would be in. But Kevin, tell a little bit about how this all started with this relationship we have with Visit Bend and the Gravel Adventure Field Guide.
So the first guide that we were involved in as a partnership was the Gravel Adventure Field Guide that was coordinated by Visit Bend, where we really provided routes, but not too much more in that guide. The next step we took was we worked with Northeast Oregon and Baker County, and we developed out a set of routes with a lot more of the written content for their travel magazine called Go Explore. And so it's got gravel cycling in there with many other things like fly fishing, rafting, mountain biking. So that was our next step. And then to the right is where we are going in terms of having complete ownership of a gravel adventure field guide. And the first one we're taking on is the Hells Canyon Scenic Byway in Northeast Oregon. So we've got that. That is a drivable route. And along that route, we have about 10 gravel routes that we're documenting that then have the full documentation that goes back to the digital guide. So if you look at the right-hand panel, the second one down, you kind of see that QR code in there. So you get a glimpse of what the route is, where that is, and a little bit of history of it. And then you can click on that QR code, which then brings you out to the complete digital guide. And then on this same thing, the Travel Oregon grant that we're applying for with the All Access Guide would be 20 routes throughout the state of Oregon that are what we call all access routes for those on e-bikes or adaptive bikes, or those who haven't been on a bike in 20 years and are a little bit overweight and looking to get back into it. So that's kind of what we're working on from the.
And those QR codes have been really key because they allow us to change if anything changes or close routes. I'm just shocked by what we've learned in the first, iteration of going around with physical guides of how quickly things change. And so being able to communicate that out to the cyclists is really important.
Oops, there you go.
Okay, podcasting. So now I'm going to turn Sarah Birch over to interview Chris about our podcast.
Hello, Chris.
Hi, Sarah, and everybody else. How are you?
Good. It's good to see your face. So every idea starts off with a seed. Tell us how the seed started for podcasts for Dirty Free Hub.
Yes. So I would lead with be careful what you ask for. So I think it was a couple years ago. Kelly and I were having dinner with Kevin and Linda just in the backyard over pizza, and I don't even really know how it got started, but I said, it'd be kind of cool if there was a way to learn more about the route, maybe on your way as you're driving to the route, or when you're done with the route, when you're driving back and you're, listening to something interesting on the route. And we kind of talked about some other stuff, and that just kind of left. Well, a couple of weeks later, I get a call, and it's Kevin, and he said, Chris, have you ever done a podcast? And I said, no, I haven't. And he said, perfect. Do you want to do some podcasting? And I said, sure, why not? And that's how it started. There was no plan. There was no real goals for what we were going to do. It was just, let's just try it, see where it goes. And our first podcast we did was me interviewing Kevin about one of the, not even a route, but just one of the areas that he traveled through during a route. And that was it. And we just said, all right, let's figure it out. And Kevin is so good at technology. He figured out the platforms, the technology to use. We had multiple iterations of different tools, and we tried all kinds of different things to get to where we are now. And Kevin was instrumental in that. And then the team to this point has helped us grow and figure things out and just constantly change and get better at what we do.
Yeah, cool. How about some stats? How many podcasters are there?
Well, we have 8 official podcasters. We have 7 podcasters that have created podcasts, and we have a new one, Mike, that will be joining the team as well. So we have Kira, Pete, Sarah, Linda, Kevin, Doug, Mike, and then myself.
Wow, impressive. How many podcasts are there?
There are approximately 90. Linda or Kevin could probably get that a little closer, but there's something like 90 that we have published.
Yeah, that's impressive. And what is the most popular podcast?
Well, I have to say, yes, you can see someone already gloating a bit, but yes, Linda has the #1 most popular podcast on snake bites, and it is, I think, kicking everybody's butt actually on that. So we have a great following, and we get lots of listens on our podcast, but Linda's has done fantastic, and it's awesome to see.
Cool, cool. Linda, are you going in every day and listening to the podcast to up the numbers? That's the secret.
Think about that.
We're on to you. No, I'm just kidding. So let's see, what am I going to ask next? How about can you walk us through the pipeline of creating a podcast from ideation for a topic all the way to the process where you actually push out the podcast to Spotify?
Sure. So I would say for a podcaster, that overall process takes between 3 and 8 hours from start to finish. And I bet it averages a little over 4, just depending on the topic and how new somebody is, or if there's issues and things like that. But it starts off where we just select a topic, and we like to tie a topic into a route, into one of the guiding principles, something like that. Not all of them are exactly tied, but for the most part, that's where we like to target. And we'll come up with an idea. Kevin and Linda come up with quite a few because they're on a route, and they say, oh, hey, let's talk about this, or here's something in the culture or the art that we saw on the route, or there's some aspect of the route that really strikes them, and that might be the topic we pursue. So we identify the topic, and then we find someone that can help us with that and target the podcaster. We reach out to that person, and then we put together a script for the podcast that we work with the interviewee. We schedule the actual recording, and that recording usually takes about 20 minutes, 30 minutes or so. Again, depending on how long you do it, we try to keep our podcast to 8 minutes or so. And then you do the editing, and that's probably one of the biggest time consumers, is just going through and doing a good job to clean things up. Then we publish it, and Linda does the publishing. She has a calendar that she works with other things that she's sending out, and then people get to enjoy it.
Yeah, awesome. And one final quickie, if you could interview absolutely anybody, but has to be related to Dirty Free Hub, who would it be? Or what would the topic be?
Related to Dirty Free Hub. Oh man, let's see. That's a great question. I have interviewed Kevin and Linda for the founding of Dirty Free Hub. If I could interview somebody, I would go with, you know what? I would go with the guy that is on his four-wheel bike that is like a hand-assisted one that he pedals with his arms, that I've seen him on like Storm King going down. So I would want to talk to him and see how he does it.
Cool. All right. Awesome. Thanks, Chris.
Yeah, thank you.
Ah.
Thanks, Sarah. That was really interesting. Okay. The other thing that Dirty Free Hub does is we do a lot of events. We do online events like this. We've put together rides. We've put together all sorts of crazy events. But Kevin, tell me a little bit about how do we actually pick the events that we're going to do? Because we're not really an events organization. It's definitely not how we make money. It's definitely, definitely not how we're funded. So why do events?
Basically, we do the events around the social missions. And so like the top left-hand slide was from Earth Day in terms of caring about the lands of where we ride. So we created a ride where we picked up trash. The top one is about rider safety and navigation, teaching people how to navigate. Top right is about basically inspiration and being with other people outdoors. Bottom right is about Erickson Flight Museum, visiting the Flight Museum and learning something about flight and what took place in Central Oregon with flight. And then the bottom one is actually out in Baker City on Halloween and spending time out in rural Oregon and spending money out there. So it's about our social missions. Our events are tied around that.
Okay. So we also recently just launched our Read and Ride program, and talk about thinking outside the box. I'd like to interview the mastermind behind this event, which is Sarah Birch. So Sarah, tell me a little bit about Read and Ride, and what did you hope to accomplish with it?
Yeah, so the whole concept of Read and Ride is that you read a bicycle and then you ride your bike out to see the place that's discussed in the book. And the whole idea is, I think, right in line with the mission of Dirty Free Hub, to learn more about the places you ride and to fall more in love with the places that you ride. So that was the intention.
Yeah, yeah. And tell me, Kevin, yeah, there we go. And how did you end up picking this book, The Big Lonely Doug?
Yeah, so I was trying to think of a book, something that is an exciting topic. Big Lonely Doug talks about, it's a story of one of Canada's trees. It talks about the old growth trees that are on Vancouver Island. And I also know that Vancouver Island is a really awesome place to ride. There are tons of miles and miles and miles of gravel rides. So I thought this would be a nice introductory book into the Read and Ride program, you know, to have an interesting topic and combine it with great riding.
And what books are you thinking about for the future?
Oh my gosh, there's so many good books. One example of a book is a book called Eruption, and it's the untold story of Mount St. Helens. It was written by a guy named Steve Olson, and he does a really interesting job of interweaving personal narratives and science and economic motives that talked about the Mount St. Helens disaster. And Mount St. Helens also has a lot of great writing, so that seems like a fantastic book. Another really interesting book is called The White Cascade by a guy named Gary Christ. And back in 1910, there was a crazy blizzard that hit the Pacific Northwest, and snow just kept falling and falling. And there were a couple of train cars on the railroad up near the old town of Wellington in the Cascades up in Washington.
Oh, cool.
And there were a bunch of people in those cars, but they were trapped, and the snow kept falling and falling and falling. And then there was an avalanche that pushed the rail cars over the slope of a mountainside. And I think that would make a super awesome read and ride. You read this awesome story, and then you go out and ride to see where this all happened. And I haven't done my homework yet, but apparently you can see some of the rail cars, you know, down along the mountainside, and certainly you can see the tunnel that's mentioned in the book. And so I just think there's a lot of really interesting history there, and places you can get to on your bicycle that you can't explore in an automobile.
Oh, well, we're really looking forward to that. So thank you, Sarah. And congratulations on your program. We're really excited about it.
Thanks.
So the other thing that we do is we do the Dirty Roads Crew. So Kevin, I'm just going to have you quickly explain what is the Dirty Roads Crew.
Okay, on bottom left, you can see that roads also have tree fall and they need to be cleared. And so the Dirty Roads Crew is something we've put into place to clear those level 2 or 3 Forest Service roads that don't get a lot of use, but are still roads. And so we have a crew now that's been put together that we identify what work needs to get done. We organize the work, and we go out and clear when we can based on fire dangers. We have 2 gentlemen who lead this. Jeff Boulay there, top right, and he's actually demoing a chainsaw carrier on a gravel bike. And then Mike Spencer, who's in the red on the bottom left there, who also organizes what we do. And all this was made available through, all the equipment was made available through a grant from Deschutes Trails Coalition.
Okay. And then the other just a couple more slides, and we promise we have communications. I spent a lot of time working with a couple of different people on getting us on Facebook, getting us in the press, getting us anything that we can do to raise awareness about Dirty Free Hub. So that's a big endeavor for us as well. And then finally, I wouldn't be an executive director if I didn't talk about funding at some point. Cam's on here, so I know she would remind me as well. Dirty Free Hub is funded by 3 different sources. So the first source is we have sponsorship, which I would say is really a minor source of funding for us, but it's certainly an important one. We're really happy when these organizations do, in fact, write us a check. The next one has to do with grants and licensing. There's a lot of funds that we can go after that have to do with tourism. So we've partnered with Visit Baker, Visit Eastern Oregon, Oregon State Parks, Visit Central Oregon, Visit Bend, et cetera, et cetera. And the Deschutes Trails Coalition has also provided us with a nice grant this year. Then the next one, but the most important funder is actually our donors, because without that, we can't apply for grants because we always have to have some kind of matching money. And there's a lot of rules. That's one of the first questions they ask us is, do you have any donors? If you don't have any donors, you're, adios, you're out of here. So even if it's, small amounts of money, it really, really does help us in telling our story. And so we deeply, deeply appreciate, the money that rolls in through our donations.
And the individual donor donations pay for things that grants will not pay for. Grants will not pay for insurance.
Yep.
Grants will not pay for website hosting. They won't pay for technology tools. They'll pay for projects. And so for us to keep the doors open, it's really dependent on donors and those sponsors like the bike shops. Because the grants can fill in for the projects, but they don't keep the doors open with daily operations. And that comes down to the donors. So we super appreciate the donors.
And then there's one final important element of Dirty Free Hub, and that has to do with what happened to our board.
Oh,
there he is. And I've asked Chuck Allen to explain a little bit about the function of our board. Here are all of our board members. Chuck.
Yeah, well, you said you wanted to make sure of the interest of time, et cetera. So I'll cut my 30 minutes down to 20. And because I wanted to go through the bios and the history of every one of these fantastic people. Well, the board consists of course, Kevin, Linda, and myself, Chris Kutach, Mike Hobson, and Cam Schmitz. And I think Cam's the most recent acquisition to the board, right?
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
So we have a treasurer that actually knows something about finance rather than me, which I was the original treasurer, and it's good that Cam is here. The board's job is predominantly to work with the founders to, set the mission, strategy, and goals, and also to make sure that the organization is compliant with, all legal and ethical and financial obligations. So we meet, quarterly, Kevin? About?
We're required to meet one time per year, but we're averaging anywhere from 4 to 6 meetings per year.
Right. And, one of the perks of being on the board is the private jet. Oh, we don't talk about those in public. I'm sorry. We do get free pizza, however, and, that's very nice. So it's a great board. It's fun to work with all of them. Linda and I have known each other for, more years than we would like to admit. And all the rest of you people, I've enjoyed working with you as well. And it was very nice running into Mike the other night because I was at an event where I knew absolutely nobody until somebody said, "Hey, Chuck." So that's the board.
Yeah, we definitely have a very highly skilled board. If you're interested in that, their bios actually are on our website. So Kevin, let's talk a little bit about the future now that we have gone through, the present. The future, you and I talk a lot about personalization. So what in the world does that really mean in personalization?
So really we want to get to it being a more personalized and customized experience for the user. So if we can identify what routes you're downloading, can we provide you then some history on that route that you just rode? Or can we provide the podcasts that relate to that route? Or can we provide you with a user community that enjoys riding that route? So we're going to look at ways that we can customize the content that's on the website and feed it to you if you want it fed to you. So it's going to be an opt-in availability, but it's kind of like if you go to your favorite sports network of, let's say, Barstool, and you can say, I like following the Seattle Mariners and the football team I like is the Dallas Cowboys, and you're fed that personalized information for those teams. And so we're looking at the personalization and customization over the long term. And this is not a short-term project. We're looking down the road 3-5 years and exactly how we do this. And we're moving there in incremental and slow steps, but we're moving there.
And you'll also see us starting to work a lot more with regional contacts, adding the Sarah, Corey, Aaron show has been just phenomenal. These people are none of them live in Bend. And that has helped us so much of having a contact in Idaho, having a contact in Eastern Oregon, having 2 contacts sitting in Washington. And I just see that as just the beginning, really. And we're not trying to take over the world. I don't, that's not what we're trying to, grow this organization to be as big as possible as it can go. But really having regional contacts for me means that these people really understand what's going on locally, and can help us maintain routes, find routes, be more attuned to some of the local issues that are happening. And so the other one for the future is obviously we've just started tapping into grants. If you have worked in any kind of a nonprofit at all, the grants game is a long, is a long haul game, and it takes a lot of time. So we need to get a lot better at that in order for us to continue to maintain some sustainable funding. Kevin, anything else?
Nope.
Okay, so now I just want to open it up for Q&A. And then we will go in and just sort of, raise a glass and have some stories if people would like to stay and tell stories. So is there any specific questions that people had?
Yeah, if you got a question, just open your mic and go ahead and ask it.
Is that Hobson drilling it on that top picture?
Yeah,
I know, it's my last race.
Yeah, that is Mike on the top picture.
Yeah, that was an ugly day. That was if you look carefully, Chris, you can see my brake levers are nowhere near aligned.
Oh no.
I hit a rock somewhere in the middle of this race so hard that I broke my rim. It did not lose air. I have no idea how it didn't lose air, and it broke my handlebar.
Wow.
Anyway, I've got a question for actually kind of generalized for everybody. So Kevin and Linda, we've been talking quite a bit about where you're going to go next, travel wise, things like that. What is, if you could go anywhere to ride your bike in the world, this is kind of for Kevin and Linda, and I'd like to hear from other people as well. Where would that be?
That's easy for me. I watched a video on Tasmania last night, and I'd go straight back to Tasmania. I loved it there.
Okay.
There's quite a few spots on my list. I would like to go to Vermont in October when the trees are turning. I would like to go to Iceland. I would go back to Tasmania, and I'd like to go to Slovenia. So those are kind of on my list.
Yeah, Chuck, how about you?
Well, I don't really get out a lot, so I saw the Tasmania pictures, which are great. I think for me, I don't know what kind of routes are there, but I remember when I hitchhiked around Scotland, northern Scotland, 1,000 years ago, and how just incredibly otherworldly it was. And I think that would be a fantastic place to ride.
Yeah. Sarah?
You got to specify Sarah's.
Which one?
Oh, Sarah B. Sorry.
Sarah B. Patagonia has some pretty awesome rides. I've done a trip down there and would love to go back. They're paving the roads more and more miles each year, but it's still pretty rustic and awesome.
That'd be a good one.
So when you said Patagonia,
Patagonia is South America.
Okay, got it.
The other Patagonia.
Yep, okay.
She wasn't talking Arizona. I assumed she wasn't talking Arizona, but
not the store downtown in Bend. How about the other Sarah?
Oaxaca is what I've been dreaming about lately. There's
Mexico.
Yeah, there's a bike packing route down there called the Grand Dirt Tour, I think it's called.
See, Linda, that guy told us to go down there. Now Sarah's onto it.
And
Sarah,
Cam,
we're gonna talk more. We got to share information. I got to get Linda to talk into this.
Yeah, the first thing that came to mind when you asked that was Croatia. The last time I was there, a friend and I, during our second week, we had rented road bikes, but then we found out there was a resource that seemed similar to like a Dirty Free Hub that had just all of these gravel roads, and people would just tour on these gravel roads all over the place. So I think that would be fun to explore.
Actually, Croatia would be cool. Just in general, it's pretty neat.
Yeah.
How about you,
yeah.
Pete?
I would say, when Sarah brought up Patagonia, well, actually, you guys brought up two places I think would be cool. Having been to both. Tasmania, I agree, Linda and Kevin, really cool place. And, Patagonia is loaded with so many miles of gravel roads, albeit maybe some are getting paved over, but that'd be a really cool place. However, it's really windy there. So that would be the other factor.
Same with Iceland. I've
Yeah.
heard it's
It would-
horrible riding in Iceland.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sue, what do you think?
Well, so a little departure here. I'm actually taking a trip of a lifetime. I'm leaving in about a couple of weeks or so to go road riding. But I need to preface that by saying that the reason that I feel like I can do this is from many of the skills and benefits that I've gotten by being involved with Dirty Free Hub and learning how to navigate and sort of ride on my own. But I'm going to Provence and I'm sort of basing at an Airbnb there for 3 weeks. And I have downloaded 15 rides that I'm going to do from there. And from there, we'll go to Mallorca. And I'm riding the coast range from Alcudia to Palma. And that's a 7-day road ride as well, all done on an independent cycling tour with downloaded GPS maps. So I never would have been able to take a trip like this if I hadn't had this involvement with this organization and learned these skills. Because I basically was a map person before and so it's just opened up the whole world. I'm really eager to explore other parts of the world on a gravel bike. But this has always been a dream for at least 3 decades because I'm totally into like food and lunching and sightseeing and that sort of thing too. So to be able to incorporate those interests along with some self-guided bike discovery is really enjoyable for me. So off the topic, but still related, I guess.
No, I would say it's pretty much on topic. That'd be cool. I've been all over Provence many, many times. It's super cool. I've not been to Mallorca. Everybody I know basically has been there, and now you're going to go there as well, and everyone raves about it. So that'll be fun.
Yeah.
And then who is iPad?
There's Audrey and iPad. I don't know who Audrey is, and I don't know who iPad is. So Audrey and iPad, if you could take yourselves off mute, introduce yourselves, that would be fantastic.
Or not. It's the competition, Kevin. Chris, how about you?
Oh, wow. That's a great question. So for tomorrow, I'm going to say Portland. In the wintertime, we're going to pick somewhere warm. But being specific, I would say Girona. Kelly wants to go to Portugal, and then I can always go back to Italy.
Cool. So I was supposed to be going to Whistler in a week and a half or so, and that's not going to work out this year for a bunch of reasons, unfortunately. That was kind of on my bucket list. And then the place I'd like to go, though, outside of that would be Japan. If you guys have ever seen Journeys in Japan, it's kind of a dorky show. But I used to work for a Japanese company, and so I've been to Japan many, many times for work, and it's terrible. But if you go there for pleasure, it's a phenomenal country, really great people. And then out in the outskirts of Japan, there is phenomenal road riding. I mean, it's people don't know about it. It's really, really good. It's kind of like alpine or AT skiing too. You know, unless you know, you don't know, and it's got some great stuff. So that's kind of what it would be for me.
Cool.
That was cool.
Okay.
So, Lindy, we didn't hear from iPad or Audrey, and that's okay.
Yeah, that's cool.
We're like 8 o'clock into it, so we're like an hour into it.
Yeah, I think that's good.
Can we raise a glass to everybody and just really
The virtual
appreciate
toast.
virtual toast.
Here's to the next 10 years.
Woo, congratulations.
I have my tea.
And this really wouldn't have been possible with every